I had 60 seconds to decide whether to save a man's life or mind my own business. And my own business had never once saved anybody. The note was already written. 6 words on the back of a receipt, folded into a square smaller than my palm. I was standing at the service station with it pressed between my fingers, watching table 4 through the candlelight, asking myself if I was really about to do this. My name is Zoe Callahan. I am a waitress at Meridian, New York's most expensive restaurant and its most discreet, the kind of place where the tablecloths cost more than my rent and the conversations are never repeated outside these walls. I had worked here for 3 years. I knew how to disappear into a room. I knew how to be present without being seen, how to move through a dinner like background music, heard but not noticed, useful but not remembered. Tonight I was going to ruin all of that. It had started 40 minutes ago in the wine cellar. I'd gone down to pull a Burgundy for table 11, threading past rows of bottles in the cool, low light, when I heard voices coming from the far corner. 2 women. Speaking in rapid, clipped Korean that bounced off the stone walls. I froze between the Pinot racks with the bottle in my hand. I speak Korean. My mother was born in Busan. She raised me in Queens in a home where English was for school and Korean was for everything real, every argument, every prayer, every story worth telling. I never advertised it. It had never mattered at work. It mattered now. The first voice I recognized immediately. Victoria Seo, fiancée of the man at table 4, the woman who had walked in tonight in a silk dress that cost more than my monthly salary, diamonds at her throat, her hand in Sebastian Kang's like she was the safest thing in his world. She was speaking fast. Precise. The Korean of someone conducting a transaction, not a conversation. He always sits with his back to the room. That's the problem. We need him facing the window. The second voice, lower, rougher, someone I couldn't see, it's already handled. Carter switched the reservation. He'll be facing the glass by 9. And the others? 3 at the bar. 1 in the kitchen. 1 outside the east exit. As soon as he's in position, the sentence didn't finish. It didn't need to. Some sentences end themselves in the silence that follows. I stood in that wine cellar with a Burgundy in my hand and felt the cold of the room go straight through to my spine. I had just overheard a murder plot. Spoken in Korean, in the wine cellar of the restaurant where I worked, by the woman currently sitting beside the man about to be killed. I left the Burgundy on the shelf. I walked back upstairs. And I stood at the service station and looked at Sebastian Kang at table 4, broad-shouldered, dark-suited, completely still in the way of men who have survived long enough to be comfortable with silence, and I thought about every reason to stay quiet. I had a job. I had a lease. I had a sick mother in Queens whose medication I covered every month. I had no idea who Sebastian Kang was beyond what the room suggested, which was, dangerous, connected, the kind of man whose enemies were not small people. And then Victoria leaned over and said something in his ear and he laughed, easy, unguarded, the laugh of a man who trusts the person beside him completely, and I thought, he doesn't know. He has absolutely no idea. I pulled a receipt from my apron. Uncapped my pen. Wrote 6 words. If you've ever had to choose between safe and right, stay with us. Subscribe now because what happens next will shake you. I picked up a champagne glass from the rack. Walked to table 4. Set it down in front of him. And as I straightened, I pressed the folded receipt beneath his right hand so smoothly that Victoria, 12 inches away, didn't see a thing. Then I walked back to my station. And waited to find out what kind of man Sebastian Kang was. He read it without moving a single muscle in his face. That was the first thing I noticed, the absolute stillness. Most people, when they receive something unexpected, react somewhere. A blink. A breath. A shift in posture. Sebastian Kang read those 6 words under the table while maintaining perfect eye contact with Victoria across a sentence about the restaurant's wine list, and the only thing that changed was a barely perceptible tension in his jaw that lasted exactly 1 second and then dissolved. The 6 words were, "Your fiancé sold you out. Look behind you." He didn't look behind him. Not yet. He was smarter than that. I watched from the service station, my hands busy with glasses I wasn't actually polishing. Victoria was talking, animated, warm, completely convincing. She touched his arm when she laughed. She looked at him the way a woman looks at a man she loves, and I thought about how much practice that must have taken, and felt sick. 3 minutes after I delivered the note, Sebastian Kong raised his hand for service. I crossed the room. My heart was doing something violent inside my chest, but my face had 3 years of professional training on it, and I arrived at table 4 looking like a woman who had nothing more pressing on her mind than whether the appetizers were satisfactory. "Miss," he said. His voice was low, conversational, pitched perfectly so that Victoria, who had excused herself to the powder room 30 seconds earlier, couldn't have heard it had she still been seated. He had timed it. "The champagne is excellent. My compliments." He hadn't ordered champagne. "Thank you, sir," I said. His eyes held mine. Dark, steady, reading me the way I imagined he read every room he entered, quickly, completely, looking for the thing that didn't belong. "You wrote the note." Not a question. "Yes." "You heard something." "In the wine cellar. 40 minutes ago. 2 women speaking Korean." I kept my voice service level calm. "I speak Korean." Something shifted in his expression. Not surprise exactly. More like the adjustment of someone who has just been handed a piece of information that recontextualizes everything. "What did you hear?" I told him. "All of it. The voices, the positions, 3 at the bar, 1 in the kitchen, 1 at the east exit. The detail about switching the reservation so he'd face the window. The sentence that didn't finish. I told it flat and fast, the way my mother always said to deliver serious news, no decoration, just the shape of it. He listened without interrupting. When I finished he was quiet for 3 seconds, 3 full seconds of stillness that I later understood was him running the information against everything he already knew and finding the places where it fit. "The reservation switch," he said quietly. "Someone inside the restaurant." The name I heard was Carter. His jaw tightened again. This time it didn't dissolve. "Carter manages our corporate reservations. He's been with my firm for 4 years." I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. "How many people have you told?" "No one. Just you." "Why?" His eyes were direct. Not suspicious, evaluating. "You could have called the police. You could have told your manager. You could have walked out of here and forgotten everything you heard." I thought about my answer. Thought about my mother saying the dangerous ones always look the most comfortable. Thought about Victoria's hand on his arm and the laugh I'd heard, real, unguarded, the laugh of a man who had let someone past every wall he'd built. "Because the police would have taken too long," I said. "And you needed to know right now." He studied me for a long moment. Outside, through the floor-to-ceiling windows, New York glittered cold and indifferent. Inside, somewhere at the bar, 3 men were waiting for a signal. "Stay close," Sebastian Kong said. "And don't react to anything that happens in the next 10 minutes." He picked up his phone and sent a text I couldn't see. Then he set it face down on the table and folded his hands and looked perfectly, completely relaxed, the performance of a man who was anything but. Victoria was walking back from the powder room, diamonds catching the candlelight, her smile arriving before she reached the table. She had no idea everything had just changed. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was what Sebastian said under his breath as Victoria sat down, so quiet I almost missed it. "She's not working alone. Find the second name before you do anything else." He wasn't talking to me. The next 20 minutes were the longest of my life. I moved through my tables. Refilled water. Took an order from table 7. Smiled at the couple by the window celebrating something with a bottle of rose. Everything normal. Everything surface. Underneath, I was watching table 4 with every peripheral sense I had, tracking the body language of a man playing the most dangerous performance of his life while the woman who had ordered his death sat beside him telling a story about a vacation in Florence. Victoria Co was extraordinary at it. I'll say that. The warmth was seamless, the kind that doesn't look performed because it's been performed so many times it has become its own truth. She touched his hand. She laughed at the right moments. She looked at him with something that in any other context I would have called love. I caught myself wondering how long. How long she had been doing this. How long since the decision had been made. And underneath that, who had made it with her? Sebastian's text had gone somewhere. I knew that because 7 minutes after he sent it, the dynamic at the bar changed. The 3 men I'd identified, mid-30s, dark suits, the particular stillness of people who are waiting for a signal, subtly shifted. Not obviously. Just a realignment. Like pieces on a board responding to a move that hadn't been announced yet. Then a 4th man entered the restaurant from the front entrance. He didn't sit at the bar. He walked directly to the maitre d', exchanged a word, and was seated at a table with a clear sightline to table 4. He opened a menu he didn't look at. Sebastian had people too. Of course he did. I was clearing a neighboring table when Victoria excused herself again, this time to take a call, her phone pressed to her ear before she'd fully risen from her chair. I watched her walk toward the corridor near the restrooms, and on instinct, pure instinct, the kind that bypasses rational thought entirely, I followed her. I moved quietly. Service staff move through these restaurants like water, along the walls, through the gaps, present and invisible simultaneously. She had stopped near the coatroom corridor, her back to the main room, speaking low and fast. In Korean. He hasn't moved. He's still at the table. I don't think he knows. A pause. Listening. No. No one approached him. The waitress brought champagne but that was standard. He's relaxed. My hands were completely still at my sides. I was 4 feet behind her, partially screened by the coatroom door, breathing through my nose. What about Adrian? The voice on the other end said, in Korean, clearly enough for me to catch it. Is he in position? Adrian's at the east exit. He's ready. We just need the signal. Give it 10 more minutes. Let the main course arrive. Everyone's distracted during service. Victoria's hand tightened on her phone. And afterward? The restaurant staff, not your concern. It's handled. The call ended. She turned around. We were face to face in a corridor lit by a single wall sconce, 4 feet between us, and 4. 1 suspended second neither of us moved. Her eyes, that warm, expressive face, went through 3 things in rapid succession: recognition, calculation, and then a smoothness that settled over everything like ice forming on water. Can I help you? She said. Her English was flawless. Her smile was flawless. Everything about her was flawless. Just restocking the coatroom, ma'am, I said. My voice came out even. Professional. Like I hadn't just heard her confirm a murder timeline. She held my gaze for 1 beat too long. Then she smiled wider and walked past me back toward the dining room. I stood in that corridor for exactly 5 seconds. Then I walked back to the service station, picked up my notepad, and wrote 1 more note. Adrian. East exit. 10 minutes. Signal comes after main course. I folded it. Walked to table 4. Set down a bread basket that hadn't been requested. And pressed the note into Sebastian's hand so cleanly that even Victoria, now resettled in her chair, saw only a waitress doing her job. Sebastian's eyes met mine for exactly 1 second. Then he excused himself to use the restroom. He didn't come back for 8 minutes. When he did, the man at the bar nearest the window was gone. And somewhere on the other side of the east exit, something had shifted. I could feel it, the way you feel a change in air pressure before a storm. Something had been neutralized. But Adrian wasn't the second name. I didn't know that yet. None of us did. The main course arrived at table 4 at exactly 9:15. I carried it myself, overriding Marcus from table service without explanation, which earned me a look but not a confrontation. I set the plates down with practiced precision. Sebastian glanced at me as I leaned in to place his dish and said, quietly, in the space between one breath and the next, the second name. Did you get it? No, I murmured. But she said it's handled. Whatever that means for the staff afterward, it's already planned. His expression didn't change. Carter is in custody. Adrian's been removed. There are 2 left at the bar. A pause. Stay away from the kitchen. I straightened. Set down the last plate. Smiled at Victoria across the table. She smiled back with every muscle of her face. I went back to my station. And I thought about what she'd said. The restaurant staff, not your concern, it's handled. I thought about handled and what it meant in a conversation where the other items on the list included murder and position and signal. I thought about the other servers on my shift, Dominic, who was working the kitchen past tonight, and Isabel, who had no idea that the couple at table 4 were anything other than a wealthy engaged pair having a romantic dinner. I picked up my phone and sent Isabel a text under the counter. Stay out of the main corridor. Don't ask why. Just stay near the front. Her response came in 30 seconds, a question mark. I sent back, please. Then I looked at the bar. 2 men left. One nursing a drink he hadn't touched in 40 minutes. The other with his hand resting on the table in the specific way of someone whose attention is somewhere other than where their body is. They were waiting. The main course was on the table. The timeline Victoria had given was running. And then my manager, Ethan Walsh, appeared from his office and walked directly toward me with the expression of a man who has just received information that rearranged his evening. He stopped at the service station and said, under his breath, "There are 2 federal agents in my office. They want to speak with you." I stared at him. Me? By name. Zoe Callahan. Right now. I looked at table 4. At Sebastian, cutting into his meal with the unhurried composure of a man who had somehow, in the last 40 minutes, managed to quietly dismantle half an operation while sharing a table with the woman running it. He caught my eye across the restaurant. Gave the smallest nod I had ever seen, barely a degree of movement, barely anything at all. It was enough. He'd sent them. Or someone he trusted had. I followed Ethan to his office. The 2 agents, a woman named Audrey and a man who introduced himself only as Grant, were standing rather than sitting, which told me this was not going to be a comfortable conversation. They knew about Victoria. They had been building a case for 7 months. They knew about the bar positions, about Carter, about the network she'd been using to route money through Sebastian's firm without his knowledge, siphoning from the inside while maintaining the perfect cover of an adoring fiancé. What we didn't know, Audrey said, looking at me directly, was who the second name was. I don't know it either, I said. She said it was handled. That's all I got. Think carefully. In the cellar, in the corridor, anyone she referenced. Any name, any title, any description. I closed my eyes. Ran it back. The cellar conversation, the 2 voices, the positions, the detail about Carter and the reservation switch. The corridor call, Adrian, the east exit, the signal, the 10 minutes. And then the voice on the other end of the phone saying, "Not your concern, it's handled." A voice I had been so focused on Victoria's side that I hadn't fully processed. But now I did. Now, in the quiet of Ethan's office with the sounds of the dining room muffled through the door, I heard it again in my memory. And I recognized it. Not from the cellar. Not from anywhere in this building. From 3 years ago. A different restaurant. A different life. A man who had come in twice a week for 6 months and tipped exactly 15% and called me sweetheart in a way that made my skin tighten, and who I had eventually learned was connected to things that were none of my business and had made a point of remaining none of my business. The voice on her phone, I said slowly. The one giving the instructions. It was a man. Older. American accent but something under it, slight, almost gone. I looked at Audrey. He said her name once, at the beginning of the call. Before he knew I might be listening. What name? He called her Vicky, I said. Like someone who'd known her a long time. Like family. Audrey and Grant looked at each other. The look of people who have just had a gap filled. Her father, Audrey said quietly. Dominic Co. We've been looking at him for 2 years. And there it was. The second name. Not a partner. Not an associate. Her father. The man who had arranged his own daughter's engagement to Sebastian Kong, not as a match, but as an access point. A long-running, patient, perfectly constructed access point, placed inside Sebastian's life 18 months ago to do exactly this. I walked back onto the restaurant floor 3 minutes later. The agents had asked me to continue as normal. Keep my section. Don't signal Sebastian. Don't change anything. They had people moving into position, not dramatically, not in a way that would clear the room and give anyone a reason to run. Quietly. The way everything dangerous happens in places like this. In the gaps. I picked up a wine carafe and went back to work. Table 4 was midway through the main course. Victoria was telling a story. I could see her hands moving, expressive, animated, painting the air with whatever she was describing. Sebastian was watching her with an expression I couldn't read from across the room. Not warm. Not cold. Somewhere carefully between the two, held precisely, the way you hold something that could shatter. I wondered how long he had known. Before my note. Whether there had been smaller things, moments of near knowing that he had explained away because the alternative was too large to hold. That happens. I had seen it with my own mother after my father left, the months of almost knowing that she later described as the most exhausting period of her life. Not the leaving. The almost knowing. I moved through my tables. Refilled. Smiled. Disappeared. At 9:40, the 2 remaining men at the bar stood up simultaneously. My stomach dropped. I looked at them, looked for the signal, for the thing that had triggered the movement, and then I realized they weren't moving toward table 4. They were moving toward the exit. One of them had his phone to his ear. The other was already pushing through the front door. Something had happened. Something on the outside had changed the calculation. 30 seconds later I understood what. Dominic Co. had been picked up outside his home in California 20 minutes ago. When the call dropped, when Victoria's father went silent, the men in the restaurant had received a code that meant, abort, exit, now. Whatever protocol existed for this situation, they were following it. Which left Victoria alone at a table with the man she'd spent 18 months preparing to destroy. And with no backup coming. I watched it happen from the service station. Sebastian set down his fork. Picked up his wine glass. Looked at Victoria across the table with an expression that had dropped every layer of performance, all the ease, all the warmth, all the carefully maintained normalcy of a man pretending he hadn't known for the last hour that the woman in front of him had arranged to have him killed tonight. What was underneath all of that was not anger. It was something quieter and much more devastating. Your father's been arrested, Victoria. Her face didn't break. I'll give her that. It held for a full 3 seconds, the professional hold of someone who has trained for contingencies. Then something behind her eyes went out, the way a light goes out when the power is cut at the source. Not dramatic. Just, gone. Sebastian, don't. One word. Absolute. Don't perform for me right now. I'm asking you not to. She was quiet. Her hands, which had been so expressive all evening, lay completely still on the tablecloth. How long? He asked. A breath. 18 months. From the beginning. From the beginning. The restaurant moved around them, the soft clatter of cutlery, the murmur of other conversations, the orchestrated normalcy of an expensive room doing what expensive rooms do, indifferent to the private devastations occurring inside it. I stood at my station and felt like an intruder on something I didn't have language for. Why tell me now? He said. You could have said nothing. Let me think it was interrupted. Victoria looked at him. And something came into her face that I hadn't seen all evening, something that wasn't performance, that was too specific and too unguarded to be strategic. Because you deserve to hear it from me, she said quietly. Not from a report. Not from a file. From me. 2 agents appeared at the edge of the dining room. Moving toward table 4. Unhurried. Inevitable. Sebastian saw them. He didn't stand. Didn't gesture. Just looked at Victoria for one more long moment with the expression of a man committing something to memory, not to hold on to it, but to put it down properly, with the weight it deserved. I know, he said. And that was all. Victoria stood when the agents reached the table. She went quietly, without resistance, the composure of someone who has known this ending was coming and has made a private peace with it somewhere along the way. Her diamonds caught the light one last time as she turned toward the exit. The restaurant barely noticed. This was the gift of expensive rooms. They absorb everything and reflect nothing. I let out a breath I'd been holding for the better part of an hour. Then Sebastian Kong looked across the room directly at me. He didn't summon me. He waited. Waited while the agents finished at the table. Waited while the restaurant continued its oblivious, expensive evening around him. Waited until I had finished clearing a neighboring table and was passing close enough that the conversation could happen quietly, without staging, without making it into something bigger than it already was. Sit down, Zoe. He said my name. I hadn't told him my name. He said it like he'd known it for a while, which meant someone had told him during those 8 minutes he'd disappeared to the restroom, which meant he was more organized than I had given him credit for, which was saying something. I sat down. In the chair Victoria had occupied all evening. Still warm. Are you all right? He asked. The question surprised me so completely I almost didn't answer it. Yes. Yes, I'm fine. You've been running surveillance on a live operation for the last 2 hours in a room full of armed people, he said. You don't have to say you're fine. I looked at my hands. They had started shaking again, the same delayed reaction as the last time, waiting until the danger had passed to fall apart. I'm not fine, I said. But I will be. He nodded. Like that was the right answer. The note, he said. Why did you write it? Real answer. I thought about it. About the wine cellar and the cold and the sentence that didn't finish. About 3 years of being invisible in rooms full of people who made enormous decisions, and the particular exhaustion of seeing things clearly and saying nothing because nothing you saw was your business. Because I was tired of knowing things and doing nothing about them, I said. And because you laughed. When Victoria said something to you, right before I went to the cellar. You laughed and it was real. And I thought, he doesn't know. Someone who laughs like that, who trusts like that, deserves to know. He was quiet for a moment. Outside the windows, New York went about itself, the city's permanent, magnificent indifference, the millions of ordinary evenings running parallel to this one. My firm is going to need someone, he said. Someone who can be in rooms and hear what's actually being said. Not just the language, the meaning underneath it. The things people say when they think no one fluent is listening. That's a very specific job description. It's a very specific skill. He looked at me directly. You speak Korean natively. You have 3 years of reading high-value rooms. You passed a test tonight that most trained professionals would have failed. You got information to the right person at the right speed without alerting anyone, without panicking, and without making a single mistake. I was terrified the entire time. I know. That's the part that impressed me most. I sat with that for a moment. Sat with the whole evening, the cellar, the note, the corridor, Victoria's face when the light went out, Sebastian saying I know with the weight of a man putting something enormous down. I sat with the shaking in my hands and the adrenaline still moving through my blood and the fact that somewhere in California a man named Dominic Seo was in custody and somewhere across the city a woman in diamonds was being processed and somewhere in the kitchen Dominic from our staff was still working the pass with no idea what had happened 30 feet away. My mother, I said. She's in Queens. She has a chronic condition. Her medication is expensive. I heard, he said. It's handled. Those 2 words. The same 2 words Victoria had used on the phone in the corridor. Handled. Only this time they landed differently. Not like a threat. Like a door opening. I looked at Sebastian Kong across the table, the man who had sat perfectly still while his world collapsed and rebuilt itself in real time, who had not once raised his voice or his hand or his anxiety to a visible level, who had asked me if I was all right before he asked me anything else. I want one condition, I said. Name it. I tell you exactly what I hear. Always. Even when it's something you don't want to hear. Especially then. He extended his hand across the table. That's not a condition. That's the job. I shook it. Later, after the statements, after the agents, after the restaurant finally closed and the staff went home still talking about the quiet drama they'd half-witnessed without understanding, I sat in the Meridian parking lot in my car and called my mother. She answered on the second ring, her voice carrying the particular warmth of someone who has stayed up specifically to hear from you. Zoe. Late night? Very, I said. Mom, are you sitting down? Always with the dramatic openings. What happened? I looked through the windshield at the New York sky, that particular orange-black of a city that never fully commits to darkness, the light of 10 million lives pressing upward into the clouds. I thought about 6 words written on a receipt. About a laugh that was real. About choosing the thing that costs you over the thing that keeps you safe. Something changed tonight, I said. Something good. I'll explain everything tomorrow. She was quiet for a moment. Then, you sound different. I feel different. Different good or different scared? I thought about it honestly. Both, I said. But mostly good. I started the car. Pulled out onto the street. Behind me, Meridian glittered in the cold, the same beautiful, discreet, expensive room it had always been, with no outward sign of what had shifted inside it tonight. 6 words on a receipt. That was all it had taken. 6 words and a woman who was tired of knowing things and saying nothing, and the world, for once, had listened. It always does, eventually. You just have to be brave enough to write the note. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear that courage doesn't always look like a grand gesture. Sometimes it's 6 words on a folded piece of paper. Subscribe and turn on notifications. A brand new story every single week. We'll see you next time.